Hello there, this is Miriam, holistic life coach and mind-body practitioner at Pain Outside the Box. And today I'm going to be discussing what we call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and their relation to chronic pain and symptoms. Okay, so what are adverse childhood experiences? So, as the term implies, these are trauma that we go through in life, typically in childhood, in our early years, that deeply affect us psychologically, right? So adverse childhood experiences include things like abuse, things like abandonment by one or more parents, misfortunes such as experiencing the loss of one or more parents, living with a parent who has a serious addiction. Okay, so verbal and sexual abuse, all of these things. So they are the more evident trauma that when we hear about them, we say like, yeah, of course, that is evidently a big trauma, as opposed to the small t trauma, which are other trauma that may go unrecognized, okay? And that's everyone actually experiences, but without really recognizing its effect on them. So I have a separate video on that, on small t trauma, which I encourage you to watch. But in this video, I'll be explaining how adverse childhood experiences can impact your pain levels, okay, and make you more prone to developing chronic pain. And also a few things that you might be able to do so you can step out of this and take control of your pain levels today. Okay, so first of all, what I'm saying here is based on research, okay? In recent years, it has been confirmed that the more adverse experiences that a person faces in childhood, the more prone that person is to developing chronic pain syndromes such as fibromyalgia, okay, as well as other disorders such as mood disorders and depression. Okay, so I'm just going to quote some research here, okay, just to give you a quick overview. So those who experience adverse childhood experiences were shown to have more sites of chronic pain and pain of greater severity than those who did not experience such adversity. Okay, this is from Science Direct. Another study. Review findings demonstrated that in chronic pain, ACEs are associated with increased pain complications, pain catastrophizing, and depression, okay? Pain catastrophizing being the situation whereby a person gets very consumed and scared of the pain itself and starts to predict the worst outcomes in his or her future. And yes, another study shows that as ACE scores increased in the population, so did the rates of chronic pain. Okay, so there's a way to calculate your ACE score. You'll find various resources online, and the higher you score, the higher the rate of chronic pain. Okay. More than 18% of children with 4 or more ACEs had chronic pain in their adulthood. And the interesting thing is that sometimes these chronic conditions do not emerge until adulthood. Okay, some children do experience mind-body symptoms or chronic pain earlier in life. But the interesting thing is that sometimes, a person who would have had adverse childhood experiences will only start experiencing chronic pain or other symptoms in adulthood or later in life. Okay, so that's just quoting some of the research. So let's try to understand a little bit what's happening here and what can be done. But because just knowing that you had an adverse childhood experience and knowing that's making you more prone to having chronic symptoms isn't very encouraging, right? It can get you stuck in the victim mentality, thinking that you're helpless. Now your chronic pain is due to what happened to you. You cannot change the past. So what can you do? Okay. So I'm just going to be giving you a few tips here based on my experience. So number 1, the more you are aware of how the adverse experience might have affected you, the better, okay? So this is why I would suggest that if you have had an adverse childhood experience, if it's clear to you that you've had this, that you see a psychotherapist or a counselor to get clear on how this has affected you and is affecting you today. If you have chronic pain, the reason why you are feeling chronic pain is because of the way you're feeling internally today. It's because of something that's happening in your brain today. It's not because of what happened in the past. So this is why I really like to emphasize that when you do psychotherapy or any kind of therapy to explore past trauma, you also explore how whatever happened might be affecting your behavior and your mindset today, okay? Another thing you can do is that once you establish a link between that trauma and your current symptoms, you make a case for your symptoms being mind-body in origin. So basically, there are different ways in which to determine whether your pain is a mind-body experience or whether it's due to an injury or another disease, okay? The fact that you have chronic pain for a long time and that you've also had adverse childhood experiences is a huge indicator that what's happening to you is a brain-based issue, that it's a psychological issue. And even though you have real physical symptoms, and we're not denying that, just knowing that there's that psychological link can empower you to actually overcome it. Why? Because the brain is neuroplastic. It means that it can change and make new connections. So knowing that doesn't leave you helpless, thinking that, oh, okay, I have this disease and I'm meant to be in pain for the rest of my life. Or I've had that adverse event that's caused this disease and that's it. No, what typically happens is that these trauma, they affect us in a way that we would be carrying around anxiety, okay, conflicts and tension in our present day life. And if we realize that, let's say, the way we are behaving today due to that trauma is causing more tension and insecurity in us, okay, then we can work on changing that. So it's extremely empowering to know that your pain is due to an emotional experience, okay, and not due to a structural condition. So this is a step that a lot of psychologists unfortunately don't help you with because they are not aware of mind-body syndrome. So again, make a case for your having mind-body syndrome if there are enough indicators. And if you're unsure about this, I will link to a questionnaire in the description, which will help you determine if you have a case for your symptoms being mind-body. Number 3, and this follows on from the first, from psychotherapy, you should explore how you might be creating stress, anxiety, and tension unconsciously today because of what happened. So keep in mind that because of certain things that happen in our past, we develop certain coping mechanisms. So what usually happens when, let's say, we undergo abandonment, when we're abandoned by a parent, is that a part of us would really need that love, but a part of us has to cope with being abandoned. So this person would develop an independent personality, okay, a hardworking personality, a mature personality, because that kind of personality trait helps this person cope in life. But at the same time, the part of that person who needs that love, who needs that attention, is still alive inside. And if that part keeps being denied the love and the attention, then that part is going to express itself somatically at some point, okay? And this part can be triggered, especially, for example, in relationships in adulthood, okay? Let's say when this person is at risk of having a conflict with her spouse, okay? Or is at risk of getting rejected by someone, okay? This might be triggering this part inside that needs love and attention. And because this part feels so threatened and so angry, okay, the person might experience symptoms in the body. Okay, so that's one example. To give you another example, for example, let's say someone was not given enough emotional support or recognition in childhood. So that person would develop into a hardworking perfectionist, let's say. So again, that person became a perfectionist as a way of coping with not getting enough support and recognition. because maybe being a perfectionist and working hard enough would get him or her that deserved recognition. Okay, so this person then would take a look at his or her life today and see in which ways he is behaving in a way that he's constantly seeking this recognition, and how his perfectionist tendencies are creating a lot of tension and pressure. As you know, if you're a perfectionist, you would have like 100 thoughts in mind. You would be really scared of failure, really scared of criticism. Again, this goes back to childhood. That part of you wants to avoid getting criticized or failing again because it's so embarrassing or it's so bad. Okay? But at the same time, there is another part of you that is being denied. And that's the part that wants to be accepted for who he or she is. That's the part that wants to be free to make a mistake. That's the part who, doesn't really care about being a perfectionist. That part is still alive there somewhere. And when it gets totally ignored and totally repressed, it might eventually manifest itself in the form of symptoms. Let's say when the situation gets super stressful. Let's say when you have applied to get a promotion at work and you're facing this threat of being rejected, of failure. I mean, there's so many things going on there. And because of what happened in the past, you are more reactive to the consequences, okay? On the one hand, you might feel extremely threatened of getting rejected. So there's the part of you that wants to be accepted. On the other hand, if you do get accepted, the part of you that wants an easier life, that wants to maybe seek out pleasure and not just work all the time, it will be threatened, okay? Because you will be working all the time and living up to the promotion. So these were just a couple of examples to explain what might be going on and to explain what you should be looking at in your own situation. There are different therapies that can help you with this if you don't feel like doing it on your own. One of them is IFS, or so-called internal family system. The other is parts work. You can find a lot about parts work also online to properly understand it. But the concept is this, that when you have a trauma, you have different parts. You kind of split into different parts. The part of you that needed love, or that needed to be authentic, let's say, the part of you that wanted to be you, that wanted to express itself, and the part of you that steps in to protect you from any unwanted consequences. So the part that steps in to make you agreeable to others, to make you independent, okay, to help you cope in life. So both parts are needed, and in the past it might have been that you needed that protective part way more than you needed to be authentic. You needed it because you had to cope, okay, somehow. The thing is, in adulthood then, I mean, things change, the dynamics change. There is still that part of you alive inside of you, other parts that are alive inside of you that want other things, that want other opposing things actually to your protective parts. So it's like you have different parts that are at war with each other inside of you. And this is what causes so much inner tension and so much inner conflict that can escalate to even be manifested in the body. Okay, so this is how I would encourage you to look at adverse childhood experiences. If you've experienced any serious trauma in your early life, and even also later in your teens or early adulthood. And I think I've given you enough to think about for today. That's all from me. And if you want to actually work more on the chronic pain aspect, once you have established these links, or at the same time as you're doing the psychological work, okay, you might also want to consider my chronic pain program, my pain-free breakthrough program, which guides you step by step towards overcoming chronic pain and teaches you about other aspects of chronic pain, including how to work with your brain's neuroplasticity, how to resume certain activities, okay, and which also teaches you the right information as to why chronic pain happens and persists in the majority of cases, which is not what most people think. Okay, so if you're interested, I'll leave the link to that in the description. And that's all from me for today. I'll see you again next time.